Hello YouTube and welcome to another video. Battle Aces is starting to wrap up now. Its first beta, that is. And I've decided to make a unit tier list at the for all the units at the end of it. This tier list is just going to be for 1v1. Though 2v2, I think 2v2 would be quite similar for most of them. Some of the underutilized units would probably rate a little bit higher in 2v2. But the good units are still good. Most of the bad units are still bad. The Kraken is really the only one that has the most change between 1v1 and 2v2. But yeah, let's get into it. So first off, we have the Advanced Blink. The Advanced Blink, it's good. Its anti is fine. Its anti-ground is fine. It's fairly tanky. It has Blink. It's fairly speedy. It's just a tier 3 ground unit. And not to make that worse or anything. Not that it makes it worse. It's quite good in a lot of areas, but at least in my experience, there's nothing that the Advanced Blink does that nothing else doesn't do. Like better. I see it a lot used at the pro level. Maybe I should put it in A tier. I'll see where other units go, and then I might bump it up a little bit later. But because I do see it a lot. In my games, though, it's never any good. I mean, like, when people use it against me, and I haven't really used it much at all. But yeah, just because, I find it better to focus on, you get your really tanky unit, you get a high damage unit, you get XYZ this, and together they generally... Those kinds of decks put together tend to do a lot better than decks made up of well-rounded units. Which is why I put it in B. It'll lose to something like a high damage unit like the Advanced Recall here, in combination with like a tanky unit like the Crusader or the Behemoth, perhaps, or the Mammoth, So that's why I put it in B. It's because it still dies. It still gets countered just as hard by everything that counters, pretty much the regular Blink and the regular Blink Hunter. Just it's better, Okay. Next up, we have the Advanced Bot, I believe. Honestly, not very good. It's a mineral dump. It's the only mineral dump in Starforge. It's tier 3. But it doesn't do very much damage against ground. It's a much worse version of the Assault Bot. The only difference is that it hits air, and then that's in the Starforge. There's just so many better units in the Starforge. I tried making this work. But as a mineral dump, so then I could, make some other unit, but it's just too bad. If you're sacrificing a slot in your Starforge, you just gotta start falling behind. If you're having to like advanced Starforge, that is. If you put it in your only advanced Starforge, slot in one, and then you have the two still staying as normal Starforge, then you're gonna... It's just a waste of a slot when you could much more easily threaten something like a Cat Burst transition, or have Locusts there, which are amazing at harass. Or what are the other units? Valkyrie, which is incredible. It's the best air-to-air unit in the game. So. Yeah, I have wondered a little bit. The beta hasn't lasted the longest amount of time, so I have wondered a little bit if you could perhaps use it in place of the Valkyrie, just because it is anti-air. The only downside is that you would, I think, still lose to something like a Cat Burst. Though maybe not, because it is so cheap. It's a little hard to say for me though, because I haven't tested it enough. Maybe if it could be used instead of a Valkyrie, in many situations, I'd put it maybe C tier. Maybe B. But as of right now, E tier. Next up, the Advanced Recall. A tier. It is extremely slow. I use this a lot, I use the same deck against Parting, in my 5 games against Parting in the video that I made recently. And this was one of those units It is so. It has so much damage. Um, it gets one shot by pretty much everything. It is incredibly slow. Its only benefits is that it has recall, and that it does an insane amount of damage. So when paired with something else, it really excels. It can snowball as well quite quickly. As long as you have something to protect it at all times, you can just keep making these, and if someone else is making ground units, you're still gonna just do fine, really. You can use that against heavy ballista, even lots and lots of things you could use this against. So, yeah. Next up, we have the airship. I'm gonna put this in C tier. I think it's got a nerf against ground for some reason, which I mean, it was never very good anyway, so I don't know why it needed that. But its air-to-air is good. It's the second strongest air-to-air unit. It's mainly for air-to-air. But yeah, if someone's using something like a two-shots locust, if someone's using dragonfly, it'll really shut that down as long as you're in position. It's not too slow, not too fast. It does hit ground, so if no one has any anti-air, then it can somewhat help there as well. Though now it's really bad at that even. So maybe I should actually put that in D. Because the Valkyrie's just kind of better. It's not too bad though, because it's not advanced. It's not advanced Starforge. I guess I'll keep it in C. It's not advanced Starforge, which makes it like a good reactive counter, especially to something like a Falcon or a Kappas. Or yeah, to some other air unit. So yeah, that's fine there. Next up, the artillery. I unfortunately never got to use this. I played against this like once in recent memory. I'm sure I played against it a little bit more than that. Now this is an advanced Starforge unit. I'm going to put it in D. When I've been experimenting with decks, at some points, this kind of seemed like it would fit, not too terribly, as in some points. It's slightly shorter range than the mortar though, rather than being like equal range, even though it's like a higher tech. Which to me, I think, you don't have to siege it, which is good, but I feel like it should at least have like maybe not the same range as the mortar, but a little bit closer to the ranges of the mortar. Actually, no, same range. I think same range as the mortar, just because it's a higher tier unit, but then it's also in the Starforge as well, which is a slightly weaker in terms of just brute force, I guess. Generally speaking. It kind of does its job. It does look very cute. I love the way it like hops around like a little rabbit there. Again, though, I haven't really seen this unit enough or used this unit enough to really put this anywhere for certain. So take that rating with a grain of salt, but it mostly just gets outshone, I think, by many other units, which is its issue. Not that, but it does fulfill a role, because the fact that it does move around, not having to siege it. But yeah, next, the Assault Bot. Now this unit is, I'm going to put it in the same unit, the same tier as the Advanced Blink. It has some of the same weaknesses as the Advanced Blink, but it's also quite a good unit because it's a mineral dump, or matter dump, whatever they call it. The red resource. The Advanced Blink takes up your blue resource, but this one does not. This one, you can kind of think of it as kind of like a cheaper Advanced Recall, except it's higher tech. Now, it doesn't have quite as much DPS density as the Advanced Recall, but it's faster. It's a lot faster with Overclock. So you can start to step things down and whatnot, which, unlike this, you can't start to step anything down. Or start to step away from anything. This certainly can. So it's a lot more microable, but yeah, it being a mineral dump is extremely good. I should put this here. And yeah, with such high DPS, and yeah, because it's a mineral dump, you can then pair it with your other units. So say if you went for like a Crusader, where's the Crusader? Here. And then you went into this, you would have some very, very strong, like quite a strong kind of bulldozer composition there. Because you have a lot of DPS here, and you can still spend plenty of energy on this. Whereas if you had a heavy ballista in combination with a Crusader, sure, it can still work well, but they cut into each other's costs a lot. Where really you want to try to, like, it's a lot more beneficial if you can try to have your two units, your two main units of your army be of the two different resources rather than both energy, or especially like both high energy count. Maybe I'll bump it up to A later, but its weaknesses though is that it's still very weak to splash. It gets one shot by the sniper, which is in the same tech tier, so that can pop up to be quite an issue actually in some of my games. And yeah, because you get to that, by that stage of the game, you have people with things like heavy ballistas. It does well against the behemoth because of its very good DPS, but yeah, things like heavy ballistas, mortars, snipers, yeah, just in general, quite a few things in the foundry tier, like shockers as well. Yeah, things that do splash, which people will certainly have by then, almost always. If someone doesn't have splash by the time they get advanced foundry, that's a little weird, and I think that's on them. That's an issue with their deck. And this is, yeah, it's weak to that. It's not something that can come through like the heavy ballista and then just start, smashing everything. Though with the right unit, paired with the right unit, it can do very well. Regular ballista, F tier. This unit, it doesn't have good single target DPS. Its splash radius is quite small. It's slow. It's still just as expensive as every other unit on that tier. It's just like a way worse shocker. The only difference between it and the shocker is that it, like, the good difference is that it shoots faster, but it does less damage, and I think it does a little less DPS as well. I mean, can't quite confirm that, but it feels like it does less DPS. But the ability for the shocker to just to just shoot its beam, do a bunch of damage, and then kind of stutter step away, is quite. It's strong. Like the heavy ballista doesn't have that. It's slow, but it shoots fast, so you can't stutter step it in any way. So really, the only time where it can where it's any good is if it's just sitting there dealing a bunch of damage, but it's also weak. It has all the downsides of the advanced recall, except it doesn't deal damage. It still doesn't do damage even in like the perfect fight. It just won't deal any damage, and it doesn't have recall. So it's just like, what are you doing? And I mean, this is Foundry, that's Starforge, so comparing them is not the same. But man, this is a trash unit. It's so bad. Beetle, E tier. I'd probably say this is the worst unit in the game, honestly. Yeah, even worse than the Bulwark, actually. Yeah. But yeah, Beetle. Onto the Beetle. E tier. Beetle, it's as slow as an uncharged missile bot, but it does like it's about as slow as an unoverclocked missile bot, yet it does less damage. I don't know why. It has a bit more burst damage, I guess, because per missile that it shoots, like each missile that it shoots does a decent-ish amount of damage. But it just shoots so slow. Its DPS is bad. It has a bit of HP, but for a tier 1 anti-air unit, you don't care so much about the HP. You want the damage. You want the mobility, especially mobility. But yeah, mobility and damage are the most important things. You don't care about HP. You have other units for, tanking, ground fighting. This is just to chase air units, which it can't do. So yeah, it's just really bad. Next unit, Behemoth. The Behemoth is very good. It's a mineral dump, and it is incredibly tanky, and it's quite fast as well. It has relatively no damage. Its little cannon can kill. It takes like 3 shots or something to kill a worker. It's like crazy for a unit of that tech. But just by being a mineral dump that's so tanky, it pairs well. It pairs incredibly well with anything that costs, that isn't a mineral dump. I mean, it still actually pairs well with the assault bot. Then you even have an even better mineral dump where then you can spend. Though I don't. Apart from rushing the Kraken, I don't know why you'd make both of these. I made both of these when I was trying to rush the Kraken often. Just because it would allow me to bank energy a lot quicker. I think in 2v2s that strat kind of works. In 1v1s it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, let's stop talking about that. But yeah, Behemoth, it just pairs so well with like everything. With every other tech unit, that is. And with many non-tech units too, honestly. It's like you're never upset really about having a Behemoth. I don't think. It's just such a good tank. It just makes everything so much better. Every weakness of your units is just gone because this will just, take the hits for you. So yeah, great unit. Blink. Blink's a hard one to place. I'm gonna put it in C tier. It just doesn't do too much damage. It's very fast though, in addition to also just having Blink. Any high level player can beat any low level player just with Blinks very easily. Much better than any other unit, I think, than they could with other units. But a high level player against a high level player, well, the opposite player can kind of, has enough micro to micro against it enough. And low level player versus low level player, they just won't be able to use the Blinks enough. Well enough to use it. I think the Blink pairs fairly well with other like melee tier 1 units. So, the non-anti-air. So if you don't run any tier 1 anti-air, but you run Blink with something like Scorpions or Crabs or Wasps. I've seen that, and that actually kind of works decently well. Well-ish. But yeah. The main issue with those kinds of decks, I feel like, is that they end up just becoming a little bit weaker because you can't spend any of your energy if you're trying to. It's weaker than making anti-air plus your regular ground unit, your tier 1 anti-air plus regular ground. The only difference is that it won't cut into your energy cost, so you can still. It won't delay your expansions or your techs. But you're generally flooding so much energy with those styles that it's just an overall worse thing. But yeah, only parting I feel like can really make Blinks work. Because he can really see the openings and try to force and create openings. But even then, against like other high level players, it's just a little. Is it really working? Kind of a unit. Yeah, I think the best way to go about this unit, if I was a developer, is I think making it slower, its movement speed, a decent amount slower. Not as slow as the advanced recall, but certainly slower. But then giving it more damage. So you can't just go across. You can't just like go around hopping around, picking off units for free because you worry a bit more about surrounds and stuff like that. But at the same time, it now fights a bit better. A little bit more like the Stalker. Because I feel like this is more like a. What would be a StarCraft comparison? I feel like it's a queen. No, that would be wrong. No. There's not really a. What's a. I'm trying to. What's a? There's not really any good comparisons, is there? can't really think of one. It'd be as if it'd be a bit like the Sentry was super fast and could blink, but and it was your main fighting unit instead of the Stalker, but it just did no damage. So like you can kind of technically go around picking off units for free for a very long time, but it's better to have a Stalker which does a bit of damage. Now the Stalker isn't like that great, but it's better at fighting compared to this, I feel like, because it can target fire things down more. It does a bit more actual damage. A bit more like burst damage as well and stuff like that. Though this is still decently tanky. Anyway, enough about the Blink. On to the Blink Hunter. I feel like I've been quite harsh on this tier list, but honestly, that might be fine. Sure. Might put it here. It got a nerf, and it's a little less good because of that, but it's mobility. Mobility is like the most important thing in a tier 1 anti-air unit. Mobility and then some damage. And this is the most mobile one. The Hornet is faster, but this has blink, which is more important. And it does it shoots them in burst damage lasers rather than, the constant kind of like trickle of damage that the Hornet has. And I think that makes it better because you blink, you pick off a unit that's retreating, like an air unit that's retreating, and that's good. So yeah, A tier. Yeah, these other air units, anti-air units in tier 1, they just need buffs. I don't know why the Recall Hunter is slower than the other 2 Recall units. It doesn't make sense to me. I think it needs to be able to walk a bit faster. Though I think its damage is a little bit high, perhaps. The Hornet is probably fine, though. But the other anti-air units, they're so bad. I guess Missilebot's not so bad, but I personally don't like using Missilebot. Anyway, Bomber. Bomber. It's better than these. I'll put it here. The Bomber has a little bit of use, but it's still fairly poor. Just because other units kind of do the same thing, but without dying. The main thing that this has going for it is it's a lot faster, and it can potentially be used against things like trying to exploit weaknesses in an opponent's defense or something. Especially if they're using rocking something like the Advanced Recall here, you can try to go around their tanky units, duck and weave, and try to get into the soft underbelly where something like a Fat Shocker won't be able to as easily, I don't think. But its main other use is that it's quite good at killing workers as well. But yeah, I need to be a little bit speedier, I think, because I'm taking a little bit of time. My voice is starting to hurt, and I'm only like a third of the way through this tier list. Bulwark. There we go. Trash. Like it does it's so bad. I don't know why anyone has it. I'm so confused as to why I've seen people put this into their unit deck. It's like a really bad cat buff. Why does it shoot air? Like, gets countered by every anti-air unit. It's just so bad. The only way to make this unit good, I think, because you can't make a well-rounded, big capital ship like this, like without making it either suck or be too overpowered, I think. It's very hard to do. I think the best and only way to make that unit good is to actually change its costs. Either make it cheaper or more expensive than something than what it already is. And if you make it more expensive, then actually make it good. It could keep the same movement speed, but actually be, potentially as good as a Cadbus against the ground. And, maybe as good as an airship against air, but costs like 400, 400. You know, so some, and then so maybe be like a supply efficient or something, or make it cheaper, perhaps a little bit faster, and still have the same fighting stats as it does now. Maybe a little less tanky, but at least you can kind of use it with the rest of your army just because it's a bit cheaper. Or potentially you could make it something like a mineral dump, but it wouldn't make too much sense, I guess, lore-wise. Maybe have it cost like 125 minerals and 250 minerals. Wait, no, 125 energy, 250 minerals. Yeah, but yeah, changes cost because having it the same cost as the cat bus, but having it just be such a bad unit. The other alternative actually is to just give it a lot of range, turn it into a range unit, but it doesn't look like a range unit. You could very easily, I think, just make a new unit and have it be the air range unit, the air siege unit. Anyway, butterfly. Butterfly is quite decent. Put above the airship. It's very, very fragile, so you can't really use it as a fighting unit at all, unless your opponent doesn't have any anti-air. But yeah, it's a very good punishing unit. You can send it over a mineral line, it will kill half a mineral line extremely quickly. Has so much DPS. 4 of them will kill an entire expansion very quickly as well. Yeah, it's just a very good unit to punish. But it's not super fast though, so you still can't use it to punish too easily. If your opponent doesn't have any anti-air, you can very easily just make 3 of these. You don't need to invest too much, but that's already plenty to then, really, really make your army, I guess, or really turn the tides of whatever battle you're losing or something if your opponent forgot to bring anti-air. So yeah, butterfly's fine. It's not super great just because it is killed incredibly easily by a tier 1 anti-air. But that's just part of its design, so I think it's fine where it is. Maybe if you want to make it slightly better, maybe make it slightly faster. But I feel like making it a little bit faster can very quickly make it a bit broken. But yeah. Crab! Crab is also not that great. I love it. The voice lines, it's like they're so positive and so cheerful. And it's absolutely adorable unit. But it's not that great. It's a very good tanky unit, though. I think it should perhaps get a little bit of a buff in this regard with its health. The Scorpion right now feels like a tankier unit when I use it. But the Scorpion also has the bonus of being like smaller and whatnot and can fit into spaces. Like if someone comes in with a Wasp or Scorpion run by, gets in between the nooks between your minerals, the pathing in this game is fairly bad when it comes to between unit interactions, at least compared to StarCraft. And then this unit especially, it's like barely small enough to get in between the nooks. But when you just try to aim with it to go through those nooks, or even just right click it to go through, to then reach the wasps, it just kind of derps around. You have to manually just kind of have to force it to go through there. And then it takes a while to clean it up because, it's so big, only one can fit in there at a time, so... To make up for its weaknesses in dealing with run-bys, I think it should get a little bit more health. Maybe even a tad more damage. But its damage is not too bad as well. Certainly it's fast enough already. Perhaps you could even make it slightly slower. Because right now it's the same speed as the Scorpion, which kind of feels a little bit weird because the Scorpion's the smaller unit. So perhaps you could make the Crab slightly slower, slightly tankier, slightly more damage. Not that much slower though. But yeah. Crusader. Very good unit. Extremely tanky. You can't ask for a better tank. It's just... It's tier 1 it's tier 1 Foundry, tier 2 unit. Foundry, regular Foundry. A bit confusing. But yeah, to be that tanky, it's like as tanky as a Behemoth, but in a tier sooner. Of course, it costs energy instead, whereas the Behemoth is a very good mineral dump. But yeah, the Crusader is just very good. It has decent DPS against buildings as well. Like a single target DPS is not too bad. Though you certainly don't make it to be a damaging unit. But yeah, because of that, you can kind of tell like one or two of them to like go attack like some expansion, and then if you can keep your opponent busy, then they'll really struggle to deal with that. It pairs very well with just lots of the higher damage units like the Gunbot, the Recall, Advanced Recall. Though this is a different tech tree, so you don't often see these two together. Assault Bot though would agree pair well with. Pairs okay with the Advanced Blink. The issue here is that the Advanced Blink is quite like tanky for its cost, and then by using the Crusader to tank for it, you kind of negate that. But it still works. Next up, we have the Destroyer. Right now, as it is, I think it definitely needs nerf or change of some kind. I wouldn't say it's overpowered, but the role that it had, just because its role is quite specific, but the role that it's specific in is a little too strong right now, I think. The fact that it can one-shot a King Crab is kind of ridiculous. Ever since the AI update, where you don't even have to manually target them anymore, that I think that allows ease of access, but a big part of unit balancing, I think, is also done around that. A little bit how a lot of unit balancing was done around the fact that the pathing in StarCraft, like in Brood War, for example, a lot of the balancing was done because the pathing was bad. If you had that same balance in the StarCraft 2 engine, the game would be broken. Some things would just be completely different, as you can kind of see with the SE Evo mod. But yeah, with that same thing, there's the human error, I guess, not being able to perfectly target every single destroyer onto the durable units. Thus, you would have some wasted damage. But recently they had that AR update, which negates that, but they haven't nerfed it because of that. Its only nerf that it has was against buildings, so it doesn't, completely just destroy structures as quickly as they did, which I think was good, and I think that's needed. I think it's better now in that regard, but I think it would be better if it shot quicker, like shot faster, but did less damage, like a decent amount less damage. Not too much quicker, but like a little bit quicker. But right now, yeah, definitely needs a nerf. Especially with the range. You could probably give it even a little bit more range, honestly. But then, yeah, just really tone that damage down. Especially the initial kind of burst damage. One-shotting a King Crab of the same cost is absolutely insane. Imagine if a Tempest could one-shot another Tempest. Or a Disruptor could one-shot another Disruptor. Oh, wait. But yeah. Next up, we have the Dragonfly. S tier. It's just so tanky, man. It's tanky and it's fast and it hits air and ground. Just those things, like it is in on of its own, just kind of those attributes together, like put together, just make it a very strong unit. Like it doesn't get punished super hard if you make some like tier 1 anti-airs. Like if you make some Blink Hunters to try to chase down some of these, you won't even like kill them unless you have a very decent amount of these. Like you'll do a lot of damage to one of them, but they're just so tanky that they'll fly away and then they'll attack another base. So they can fly around, do a lot of things without actually being punished terribly hard for it. Its damage, it's not great, but it's certainly good enough to utilize their speed and tankiness. They can also hit air, of course, which is, the anti-air is pretty bad. Like, they'll lose to any other anti-air unit. Like, but it's the fact that it can shoot air to air allows it to, immediately just negate something like a Falcon user or Cat Bus potentially. A little less so the Cat Bus, as long as you have another form of anti-air, but especially, S tier. Next, we have the Falcon. Falcon's a little bit interesting. Falcon's very interesting. It feels niche, but at the same time it feels strong, just regular. It's a very strange unit. I'll put it low A tier. Do I put it low A tier? Is it better than the assault bot on the advanced blink? I feel like I have too many units in A tier and I need to be able to differentiate A and B tier together a bit more. Maybe I'll put it in B tier instead. High B tier. Yeah. Falcon. Falcon Punch! No. Well, that actually kind of is what it feels like, honestly, if someone makes these against you. They're designed to beat Tier 1 air units, yet it's not advanced Starforge, it's just regular Starforge. So the fact that it beats Tier 1 air units is quite insane. Though it's a little bit deceptive. It's hard to say. It's to make it balanced, right? Because it can beat Tier 1A anti-air. To balance it out, it of course can't hit other air units, right? But it. Let me just turn this music just a slightly bit down. It's incredibly slow. Its DPS isn't super high, but it's like tanky. So it's like a mix mash of being tanky and having good DPS. But it's mostly tanky than having good DPS, and that's I think definitely the correct way to do it. The ratio that they have right now. Because otherwise, if it were slightly more geared toward DPS and a little less geared toward HP, it would make it a lot harder to counter because you wouldn't win the ground battles anymore. Currently, as long as you have a good anti-ground unit, something like a mortar or a shocker or an advanced recall, you'll still win the ground battle. And then you just have to deal with the Falcons. If the Falcons had more damage and a little less health, that would be just as hard to deal with by Tier 1 anti-air, yet they would always be winning that ground fight because they'll be killing your advanced recalls, your shockers and stuff, and mortars and whatnot over time, whereas you won't be killing their Falcons until pretty much most of their ground is gone. Unless you have a counter ready, like an airship or something, or Heavy Hunter, which it's not super uncommon for someone to have an airship, or especially like a Dragonfly, but I mean, having an airship's not actually that common at a high level. So majority of the time you're trying to rely on Tier 1 anti-air, and you can. Here's the trippy thing with it, because it beats Tier 1 anti-air, but because it's so slow, by the time it gets across the map, you've been able to spend more money into anti-air than they've spent into Falcons, thus allowing you to beat the Falcons because you have more stuff. More ground to air than they have air to ground, basically. Defensively, though, you won't be able to beat these with Tier 1 anti-air, as long as it's like same cost for cost. Never, pretty much. Yeah, you shouldn't ever be able to. But yeah, it's like a timing unit. It's like a very threatening unit. It says, you better respond to this unit, otherwise you might lose the game. It makes it very hard to micro, and you really need to get your ratio of units correctly. Like if you're making something like mortar shockers or advanced recalls, you really need to make sure you're not making too many, but you're making enough to win the ground battle. Because if you can't win the ground battle, then you're definitely gonna lose. Because if they still have some ground support, you're not going to be able to beat them with your Tier 1 anti-air, which is why it's quite tricky and very important in that regard. But it still can get beaten by by more dedicated anti-air quite fine. Anyway, 40 minutes into this video almost. Oh my goodness. And we're halfway. Get a drink or like a little snack or something, guys. We're only halfway. Next, Gunbot. This definitely needs nerf, this unit, I think. Yeah. Gunbot if you're playing Gunbot against Recall here, you basically just auto won the game, which is a massive issue. A lot of people consider Recall to be strong as well. It outranges Recalls, and it's faster than Recalls. Now, I don't know if you know maths, but if a unit is faster than a unit and has more range than a unit, you can kite that unit forever. And the Gunbot isn't lacking in DPS either. So those things all put together just make the Gunbot a pretty stacked unit. It just needs to have its range lowered, really, or its speed. But I think it should keep its speed. It's kind of important to the unit's identity, I think. Yeah, its range shouldn't be higher than a Recall's. Yeah, otherwise you just end up just insta losing for some reason. At least if you're going against a good player who can, do that micro. The micro is still a bit finicky, but it's not too hard to do as long as you can stutter step precisely, as long as you don't have too much ping. Next, Heavy Ballista. I'll put it in low S tier. It's a very strong unit and it can end the game, but it's not terribly hard to counter. It can it's a bit of a snowball kind of unit. I think the biggest issue right now is that it isn't durable for some reason. Why isn't it classified as a durable unit? Maybe give it a little more HP and make it durable. For some reason it's not counted by the Destroyer. The Advanced Recall still does enough damage where you can kind of beat it as long as you have tanking. Though even then, yeah. But yeah, the Heavy Ballista is actually quite fast. So you can kite things with it, which is, that's quite strong actually, to be able to kite things with a unit which already has a decent amount of HP and a lot of damage, not just splash damage but single target damage. Like it's like imagine like a siege tank, except no, this would be a very good comparison. It's basically a siege tank but without the siege mode. Just a regular tank, except it shoots the shot of a sieged tank. Not the same range, but yeah, same splash, same damage, very strong. Oh, except it also shoots a lot faster too. Yeah, just very strong. If you have something like enough mortars though, like a critical mass of something, you can kill them. And because they're quite expensive, they're not super easily replaceable. Once you kill them, then you win. So they're not, I wouldn't say they're overpowered, but they're very strong. Next we have the Heavy Hunter. Put it here. This is kind of like the tier of anti-air. I mean, it's 2 anti-air units. but yeah, it's alright. It doesn't do damage against ground, despite what people may think. It's decently fast now though, which does have that going for it. And it does a lot of damage. Well, a decent amount of damage-ish. Decent-ish amount of damage against air units. It can two-shot a Dragonfly, which, you had me talking about how tanky it was earlier. It can two-shot a Dragonfly, so that's quite big. It loses to the Cat Bus, which as a dedicated, pretty much, yeah, very, very dedicated anti-air unit, losing to the Cat Bus can be a little bit surprising, but it is also a ground unit, so you're like, yeah, maybe, okay, sure, fine. Previously, it could still fight Cat Bus if you were like ahead. If you killed their second base before they got to Cat Bus, went back home, didn't spend too much of your energy, and then made Heavy Hunters in the past, you could then hold the Cat Bus counterattack. But if they held their third, you start making these guys, you're going to lose to the Cat Bus. So I really liked that. It felt quite fair to me. Like cost for cost, Cat Bus would win, but you could make these well enough to kill Cat Busters. Not anymore. They don't do any damage to Cat Bus now. They just don't. They're a little bit faster. I don't think they're fast enough to kite a Cat Bus, but they are quite fast now, which Makes them, of course, is very, you heard me talking about the Blink Hunter and the Hornet. It's quite important. So it's very, very strong against lots of air units. The issue with it comes down to the fact that it takes a Foundry slot, which normally is better given to something else, which does a little bit better at something. I believe that's the heavy turret. That's the turret, yeah. Heavy turret, I personally haven't really used it. At least not properly. I haven't made a deck that's designed to account for a heavy turret. I've seen some people have started to go heavy turret in combination with advanced recalls, and then rushing into Cat Bus. And I've heard actually that's been quite strong. Because you can place these down and they're quite tanky. They do a little bit of damage as well. They do a decent amount of damage. Like, they do a decent amount of damage per shot, but they shoot pretty slow as well. So it's like, but they hit air, they hit ground. Hitting air is pretty good. Yeah, unless you have a mortar, this in combination with the advanced recall will hold almost anything on like tier 1, or on regular Foundry and regular Starforge. Most things, not everything, but it'll hold a decent amount. So it's fine, I guess, but I'm not super certain. Haven't played against it enough. The deck that I have kind of just trashes this. I have the mortar and I also have the advanced recall, so and the mammoth. So advanced recall, Scorpion, Mammoth will just completely trash this because advanced recall has so much damage, and the mammoth and the scorpions are much better for tanking than this is, because you can move them, and they're also just better at tanking. And then mortars just outrange them and do a lot of damage. So yeah. Hornet is fine. It's very fast. It has some decent DPS against air and ground. Its unit hitbox is a little bit larger than its actual size, which is a little strange to me. It makes him quite awkward with the pathing at some points. The thing that I found most outrageous about them, though, is someone was going Scorpion Hornet against me, and I was going, Scorpion Blink Hunter. They just made a couple of Hornets, and they just kept chasing down my Scorpions every time we would have a normal, Scorpion on Scorpion fight. And I was like, bro, because I kept losing 2 Scorpions every time to them, over time, like eventually, but it's the Hornet attacks. So they're alright. They don't have any burst damage though, because they're constantly shooting like very, very quickly in low damage, and because of that makes it very much harder to chase down like harassing air units than the Blink Hunter. They're better at fighting air units straight up though than the Blink Hunter is. But chasing them down, ironically though, because it is even though it is like the fastest T1 anti-air unit by far, ironically it's worse than this because it doesn't have that burst damage. Not that this has a ton, but it's better than the Hornet. Regular Hunter, E tier, its stats are just terrible. Everything else is just better. Like, you're better off making a Blink Hunter. It's like the same thing but with Blink, which surprised me. I was thinking, oh, the Blink Hunter's got to be worse than the regular Hunter statistically, because it has Blink, so therefore it must have a little less damage, or a little less speed, or a little less something, to make up for the fact that it gets Blink for free. But apparently not. So, because the devs, because David Kim was talking about, they want people to try out the new units. So they're making the units that you start with a little bit weaker. To me, that doesn't make much sense. Of course, they're going to try out new units. I want to try out new units, whether they're stronger or not. I don't care. They're new units, and of course, there's going to be something that's going to be strong as well that I'm going to prefer. But that doesn't mean you have to make these deliberately really weak. No, they should still be alright, I feel like. But yeah, they're honestly, yeah, they feel better than the Beetle. I think they're a bit faster. I think they might have a little bit more damage or something. The Beetle's just tankier, but that's not really something that's ever relevant. Cat Bus. Yeah, I'll put it here. Cat Bus is very good. It's a very, very threatening unit. It's a if you don't have anti-air, I'm going to kill you now kind of unit, you know. If you don't have anti-air, I'm rushing this unit, and you're just gonna die. And by anti-air, I don't mean tier 1 anti-air. I mean like proper, more dedicated anti-air. Not even like this thing anymore. Like you either need an air unit or you need a predator, and predator's not really something that you can make against the Cat Bus, like a rush at least. I mean, maybe some people have, but I imagine it to be a more specific scenario. Because I don't feel like the decks that you normally make when that happens allow for predators. If you're making Foundry, a deck that would allow predators, I feel like, would have you going Starforge against a Cat Bus rush. Though I could be talking nonsense. I don't know. Anyway, next, King Crab. No, I might move these down. These are not the same. There. That looks a bit better, I think. Yeah. Oh, no. It's too niche. King Crab. Its damage against buildings is way too high, I feel like. Like, it'll just, like, chop down a building as if it were, like, a little oak tree or something. I'm like, bro. It's quite fast. Its major downside is that it gets one shot by the Destroyer. But other than that, it's very strong. It'll win in any one-based all-in. If your opponent made an expansion first, it'll just insta-win. Because it just does a crazy amount of damage. I think it honestly needs to be nerfed. It's quite fast as well. I think it's a little too fast. I think it could be made a little more tanky, but decrease, like, have the splash damage decreased, perhaps. Maybe maybe you could keep the single target damage for most of its stuff. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel like a cooler design for the King Crab would be to make it a weaker unit, but to make it a little bit cheaper, like 100 instead of 125. Or maybe like a 125-75 even. Or 175. 100 and then 75 actually. Make it a weaker unit, but make it stronger. Well, like weaker unit, but maybe like keep the speed or something. I imagine that would be quite good. It'd be a little bit like a Langsknecht from the, but you know, actually decent. You know, from the Holy Roman Empire and Age of Empires 4. Like just a splash melee unit that you can just kind of add with the rest of your army. Give it a bit of HP, not the most damage, but you know, enough to beat anyone who doesn't have any support for their tier 1 units. Maybe have it be able to pair with some other, pair well with some of the other tier 1 range units. I think that would be a very good place for the King Crab. Maybe you could call it something else, and then maybe you could have the actual King Crab be like a advanced Foundry unit or something, and then make that be an absolute monster. I think its current place makes it quite hard, because it's you either make it a worse tank than the Crusader, or like a super splash DPS and make it like way more abusive than things like the Shocker or the Mortar. So I think it needs to be distinguished in these other ways, like making it cheaper or something, for it to actually have a good place in the game. But yeah, right now I think it's a little too strong. Just in damage that it doesn't run by can be alright, but I think the speed at which it kills a base is too much. And it's certainly way too strong on one base all-ins. In general, I think there should be something done about one base all-ins. Just to nerf them a little bit. I don't know what that would be right now though, other than just maybe making the maps a bit larger or something, I don't know. Next up we have the Kraken. Oh wow, actually there. It's not the same as these. It's actually like you use. I don't know. Nah. I lost 1,200 points on a stream that I just did, trying to make this unit in a 1v1. This isn't a 2v2 list. You just either win or lose before you get to it. It's just taking up a unit slot. The only thing that can be done for the Kraken is to give it a 9th unit slot, I think. And just have it specifically for units like the Kraken. Make some other units that might be similar. Maybe cost slightly different. Or something, I don't know. Maybe you could have like an event as well instead of a unit. Maybe there could be events that cost 3,000, that would significantly, some might significantly hamper the opponent, some might significantly bolster your forces, or you might be able to summon this dreadful monster, and it would be something that you didn't have to tech to. It would just be very expensive, perhaps. So you'd see it very, very rarely, but you could actually maybe use it. The biggest issue right now is that you can't use it because it takes up a unit slot. And it's so expensive. More so that it's so expensive, but if you could play a normal game and then eventually in a rare game you'd be able to make this, that'd be fine. But if you put it in your unit slot waiting for that to happen, you're just going to be losing too many games because you don't have something like a cat bus in your unit deck. So yeah, it's more for 2v2s right now. Even in 2v2s though, it's a little hard to get. Once you get there though, it's very, very strong. Locust. I'm going to put it here. I'm going to put it lower than the cat bust because the cat bust it almost does a similar thing, except it's just this is just like a game-ending unit, whereas this is just a harassed unit and hopefully will end the game a little later unit. This does hit air, which the cat bust doesn't. So this will technically be the cat bust, technically. But yeah, it's a lot faster. It has some very good damage to ground. It's 50-50, so it's very cheap. It's like a dragonfly, basically. Just think of it as like your advanced Starforge version of a dragonfly, except it's yeah, the advanced Starforge dragonfly. Yeah, except I think it might even be faster than the dragonfly. Yeah, I think it's faster. It has more damage. It dies a lot quicker, but that's just because it's 50-50 unit. A lot cheaper than the dragonfly. Yeah, very strong. Can very easily overwhelm like tier 1 anti-air if they don't have like a decent amount of it as well. Not that tier 1 anti-air can't deal with Lucas, but yeah. Mammoth. It's a little bit tricky. For me, I might have a little bit of bias toward it. I'm not super certain how well it goes with other people. For me, this works very well. I'll put it here. The reason being, it's like a slightly worse Crusader, but in the Starforge. So it allows you to get something like a Dragonfly. Like an air unit, which air units are very good if you can get them. The main issue with an air unit is that you often just die to the Foundry push. But this is kind of a Foundry unit in the air slot, so this allows you then to deal with those Foundry pushes and to counterattack against those Foundry pushes by going Starforge. So you'd still being able to then, make Make your air harass unit or something. The air unit that can punish your opponent. Maybe like a falcon, actually, yeah. I pair them with the advanced recall, because that way I get tanking for my high damage units. And these two pair together very, very well. They beat pretty much anything on the ground if you micro them well. Almost anything. They can struggle against mortars because mortars can target fire this. Though not mortars on their own, but more mortars in combination with something like a destroyer. But yeah, they're quite good. You don't really regret having a mammoth in your deck. They're just very nice to have. Missile bot. Now this thing used to be completely OP. Because this just used to be able to beat things like even a cat bus. But it's just tier 1 anti-air. You just have this unit and then you wouldn't need any other anti-air in the entirety of your deck and you'd just be fine. It's a bit crazy. Since then though, it's got nerfed. It's still not bad. I put them at the top of C tier. I personally don't like using them because using overclock on an anti-air unit, trying to chase down other like air units and stuff, a bit annoying. A bit hard to use. It's just like a bit of a tax on your APM and your skills and mechanics. And you need overclock to make it fast. Something which the Hornet does normally, just automatically. And the Blink Hunter has Blink as well, so you can jump on things. The Missile Bot struggles a bit more to jump on things because it's slower than a Hornet, and you need to activate overclock to be at a decent enough speed to catch the air units. But then it doesn't do the most burst damage either. It just shoots missiles quickly. So it's slightly better in the straight up fights, but it's a bit hard to really rank. Well, it's a bit hard to say. Yeah. Mortar. Sorry, I just love this bit of the song. I think I will put Mortar in the S tier. It is very strong. It's like a siege tank, but it doesn't have a minimum range, and it's tankier. Might think, oh wow, that's so overpowered. And it is quite strong. But it doesn't have any its single target DPS is pretty mediocre. Pretty bad, honestly. It's just there for splash. And it doesn't have, the base attack which the siege tank does. Like the siege tank can shoot when it's unsieged. This you have to siege it before it can do anything. It also doesn't have as much range as something like a siege tank. It's very long range, but it can't shoot further than it can see. But yeah, the mortar doesn't beat every ground unit, but you get a lot of them. You get like 5 of them in a very good position, or if you're pushing across the map and you have 15 of them, it's very hard to stop. As long as you pair it with something like a Crusader, which will tank for it, or a Destroyer, which will kill tanky units for it. Because this doesn't have single target damage, but this definitely does. Then yeah, you'll do very well. With mortars, it just scales very well, and it's a defensive unit anyway. And if you're being defensive, you want something to scale. If you're being defensive, but you're getting worse over time, you're doing something wrong. You should be attacking. But yeah, this is defensive, and it scales better. So it gets stronger and stronger the more you defend. That's not bad at all. I wouldn't say it's completely. I wouldn't say it's overpowered. I'd say these two might, I think, need a nerf, especially this one. Like this also needs a nerf, but this would be wrong to put in S tier. This probably needs a little bit of a change / nerf as well. This one maybe not as much. That wouldn't be terrible if it was nerfed either, I think. I don't know what that would be in there. Maybe the attack rate slightly. Yeah. Yeah, Mortar's fine. Not much to say about it. Predator. Predator. Just kidding. Predator is not too bad. It's... Put it here. Yep. Like high mid C tier. It beats every single air unit, which is fair enough. It's advanced Foundry. It has a long range as well. I don't think it does enough damage against ground. It should do a little bit more damage against ground. Something which it currently lacks. It does. It can shoot against ground. Not that it really does much. Doesn't have the most range against ground, I don't feel like either. But it's long range against air, and that's quite strong. What's the time now? Okay, it's not too late. But yeah, it's good anti-air. It's quite good anti-air. It's a bit slow. Its size is a little bit awkward. I feel like it's not like super big, but it's not super small either. I mean its size is probably fine, but yeah. It's not fat. It doesn't need to go on a diet. But yeah. It's just... It could use... Yeah, the main issue with it, of course, is that, like with Foundry, you're generally going to be playing against other Foundry if you play Foundry. Well, I mean, no. But yeah, your Foundry you're kind of relying on that as your anti-ground. Especially advanced Foundry, you have units like, when you have units like the Assault Bot. Actually, I might there. But yeah, when you have units like the Assault Bot or the Heavy Ballista or the Sniper, which I'll get to later, those are very good against ground. If you have those with the other units that are in, the regular Foundry, that they can be, very, very strong at killing other ground. Then you add this into one of those, you're gonna just lose on the ground. So you're kind of relying on Starforge, but Starforge doesn't really have much there either, except the Cat Bus. But the Cat Bus is advanced Starforge. You will not often get to advanced Foundry and advanced Starforge in a single game. You can get Foundry and advanced Starforge, or advanced Foundry and Starforge. But advanced Starforge and advanced Foundry in a game? Probably not. Besides, they both cost a lot of energy, so they kind of cut into each other's costs there. So you're going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time before you can get a decent number of either of them. If the game went for 20 minutes, it wouldn't be so bad, but it goes for 10 minutes at most. So, yeah, that's his main issue. If there was something better in the Starforge, probably regular Starforge, like it could pair, I guess, too terribly with like Mammoth Recall and Mortars maybe, but yeah. Yeah, you don't really have something that's too great there. I guess it does kind of pair okay with the Falcon, but yeah. Raider. Yeah, he doesn't belong with these guys. The fact that he's a mineral dump and that he has some still okay-ish DPS is more than I can say for these guys. The Raider. The Raider is just too slow, and it doesn't deal damage against anything except workers. It kills workers very quickly. It's your anti-worker unit. That's its entire description. It's its whole shing. Its whole thing. Schlang. Sling. I don't know. It's the whole thing that's got going for it, except it's so slow it can't really get there. And then the issue with that then becomes that, like, if someone has Crusader Shocker, which is quite popular and fairly standard, and then you put a Raider in there, maybe you might have the Crusader as well, or the Shocker as well. You're just going to lose that fight really badly. Your army's just going to get wrecked, and there's nothing the Raider really does there. It just really needs a speed buff. Potentially killing workers just slower, like twice as slow as it does now, but at least be able to get in there and run by, kill something before it dies, or maybe kill a little bit of something and then get out, rather than going in there and then killing the entire mineral line. I don't think it should be, just zapping in there, killing the entire mineral line and then leaving. But it should just be able to zap in there, deal something, and then leave. Or if you don't respond to it, of course, you'll get your whole mineral line wiped, of course. But it should be a little bit faster, maybe less damage, or it could be reworked into just a ground unit that shoots while moving. Like a Cyclone Hellion combo or something. Which then could also be technically used on workers, and that wouldn't be a bad thing. Like, it would be good against workers, but it wouldn't be its only thing. But yeah, that would require a whole rework, so... Yeah, it's just bad because it takes up a foundry slot. Recall. Ignoring the gunbot? I'll put it here. The recall's quite good. It's tanky, it does good damage, and it recalls. It's quite slow, but it's not so slow to be completely unusable because it does have recall. It's quick enough to go across the map, sniper base, and then recall back home if you're not ready for it. Not that that happens every game, but it does happen. Yeah, the fact that it can always just recall is quite threatening. And because it's ranged and has good DPS, it also snowballs and it scales well, right? And being such a strong defensive unit with recall, scaling well then turns it into quite a strong unit. Its only major issue is this bugger right here, but I'm not going to hold that against him because that is completely broken, and I don't know why more people haven't been bringing that up. Every game I've seen where it's just gunbots against recalls, the gunbot just wins at the start. At a high level. Yeah. And there's nothing the recall player can do. People say, oh, look, the recall player's getting out microed. No, they're not getting out microed. The gunbot player's doing micro, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Doesn't matter if it's Serral or Clem controlling the recalls. As long as you have a semi-competent player, well, maybe not semi-competent, but as long as you have a player of a decent enough level, you'll just lose playing recalls. So something needs to be done about that. But I won't hold that against it here in its ranking. It's still a good unit. Recall Hunter. Now this is an interesting unit to place. I'll put it here. It does a lot of damage against air and ground. It's not terribly tanky, but not terribly fragile either. It is so incredibly slow. I don't know why it's so much slower than the other recall units. Man, it feels like it takes a year for it to walk from the command post expansion thing to the minerals. But it does have recall, so yeah. But without any kind of speed like Blink, it kind of struggles to chase down air units, of course. Now it does have recall, so it can still go around and defend bases, but yeah. And then it can fight straight up as well, so it's not too bad. by any means. So yeah. Recall Shocker. It's not that great. It's a shocker, but it's just a lot slower and it does less damage. And it technically can recall. But that's not very useful when it doesn't do anything else. It needs to be more distinguished from the actual shocker. Maybe have like a more range or something, or maybe more single target damage and less splash. But it needs to be distinguished some way from the shocker, so you'd get it not just for having recall, because it's just better to be a bit more in position and use the regular shocker there, in that case. Its hitbox is also very strange. It like, you can't have any other units within it. Like if you see a bunch of recall shockers walking together, they walk so far apart from each other, skin wise. The readies really needs to be trimmed down to be more similar to their visual size, for sure. I don't think they should be a terribly large unit that takes up a lot of space, like the regular shocker is. Just to make it at least somewhat better in some kind of way. But it's just a worse shocker. Just don't make that. It's more useful than, like these units, of course, but it's just a worse shocker, really. Scorpion. Yeah. Top of A tier. It's a good unit. It's tanky. Its damage isn't, that great, but it's tanky enough that you can use it later on in the game. It's fast. It's just a very solid unit. Because it's a 50 mineral unit, you can get concaves with it much easier. Like if you're using crabs, you're too limited in your unit numbers to really be able to get concaves and set up these very big fights. But Scorpion, you can do that. Scorpion's like a crab, but with more utility, basically. And it's small, so it can get into those little wedges and kill the wasps when they get into your mineral line. So yeah. Shocker. Yeah, Shocker's pretty decent. It does damage. It does a lot of splash. It's a little bit interesting because it can also get killed quite easily too. It doesn't have that much HP. It's a bit slow. It's quite clunky. But it feels cheap for what it does as well. But at the same time, it feels easy to counter. At the same time, snowballing. I don't know. It's a little strange to put it, but it's like an Archon. Okay. It does some splash. It doesn't hit air, but it does good damage. Does good splash. A lot of people use it. Pairs fairly well with the Crusader. What else do I say? Pretty simple. Sniper. A little hard to place this unit. Because in some regards it's like A tier, like top of A tier. In other regards it's like closer to C tier. It does a lot of damage. It has the longest range in the game, so it outranges the mortar. It's essentially the counter to the mortar, but because it does a lot of damage and has a lot of range, you can also use it to counter things like the heavy ballista, any of most other tank units. Not as much the behemoth, because the behemoth is quite cheap and is very, very tanky. But most like middle tanky units, like crab, shocker, yeah, you can just poke at them from a safe distance, force them into attack to you. That's actually quite strong. The fact that it forces them to attack into you might actually. Yeah, it's a little tricky. Like these three are all kind of like good. Like I'm not mad if I have any one of these three. It's quite hard to decide which one do I pick out of these three, and I'll probably rate them like this. It really depends on what else you have, but I'll probably rate them a little like this. Because this is a bit vulnerable to splash, is its only thing. These are both mineral dumps, so you kind of normally prefer this over this, but then this is also quite good. Yeah. If you're in mortar versus mortar matchup, and you have this and your opponent doesn't, you basically win, unless they have the behemoth, in which case it's a little less tricky, but you can still, if you play it well, you still pretty much just win. Yeah. It one-shots this unit as well, by the way. It one-shots a few of the tier 1 units. And once you get a decent amount of them, it can actually snowball, and it can be quite hard to counter. Next up, we have the Stinger. Just behind the Shocker. It's just single. It's a little bit like a faster, advanced recall. Another consequence of being faster is that it does less damage. For its cost, that is. But it still does a lot of damage. It has enough HP that it doesn't just get one shot. When you right click it. You do actually need to do something about it. It can be quite tricky in some all-ins. You can use it in some one-base all-ins. It can snowball quite quickly as well. Pairs well with some of the other faster, with some of the fast melee units. It's good at targeting down other units, like a Shocker or something. The Shocker does a better job though, in that because it does splash and does a lot of damage. It'll generally do better against the tier 1 units than the Stinger will. But the Stinger can snowball because it's consistent damage, and you can target other large units down with it. The issue is, imagine Scorpions versus Scorpions, and one player has Stinger, the other has Shocker. Shocker's going to win, because the Shocker does more damage against Scorpions, so they'll have a lot more Scorpions by the time the fight is done. If you're winning with a Stinger, though, you just win pretty much. Because once the Stinger starts to out DPS, like once the Stingers that exist start to out DPS the Shockers that exist, and the Scorpion amounts, let's say they're somewhat even after the fight is mostly over, the Stingers then just immediately kill all of the Shockers as well, and then you win the game. So overall, I'd say it's worse than the Shocker, but it is still quite good. It's on Starforge as well, so the fact that you can also then make like a dragonfly with it can be quite actually threatening. Next up, we have the Swift Shocker. Initially, I thought the Swift Shocker wasn't too bad, but more and more, I've been going like, yeah, actually, maybe it's not as good. Yeah, maybe it's not as good. Yeah, maybe it's not as good. I'll put it here. Like it suggests, it's a Swift Shocker. It does less damage per shot, but it shoots a lot quicker. I think it has the same, or at least a similar radius, because it can hit 4 workers at once. So I think it has a very similar splash radius. Just shoots faster, does a little bit less impact damage, but you can kite things with it. But because it doesn't do that much damage, kiting things with it isn't actually the most useful thing in the world. Like it was the first unit that I actually bought. One guy was saying, "Oh yeah, to beat King Crabs, you can kite King Crabs within it," and I was kiting King Crabs with it, and I'm like, this is taking all of my effort, and it's taking a long time for me to kite King Crabs with it. For me to kill King Crab with these, so yeah, not as great, just because it doesn't pair as well with like the very big tanky units like the Crusader or the King Crab or something. But yeah, regular turret. Put it in D tier. It is still, it shoots at least, which is more than I can say for some of these. But it's just bad. It's just worse than all of the other Foundry units. I don't know what to say. It's just just don't use it. I mean, yeah, it'll do more than this at least, I guess. It hits air, I guess, which is useful. Um, but yeah. Okay, Valkyrie. Some interesting final units. It's a bit hard to place. I'll put it here. Now, its air to ground is trash, but this is the best air to air unit in the game. Generally making it the best anti-air unit in the game. Now, technically, this is better, technically. That's Advanced Foundry, this is Advanced Starforge, but this flies as well. And a flying unit is a lot better at chasing down other flying units than a ground unit is, let me tell you. Especially this is slow, this is fast. Not super fast, but fast enough. Like, a couple of these will kill an entire fleet of locusts very, very quickly as well. It shoots in like volleys fairly quickly as well. Does a lot of damage. Takes down cat busters very quickly. It can be dealt with by tier 1 anti-air quite easily as well. I think it's quite balanced where it is right now. Perhaps maybe slightly more range against air, but no, I don't think it needs it. Yeah, it's just a fine unit. Maybe slightly more damage against ground actually. Now that the range against ground was nerfed so that it can't outrange your ground units, I think its damage can be brought up slightly. Because right now, like if you killed all of your opponent's anti-air and you have, 4 Valkyries, the Valkyries don't do anything against ground. Like I feel like they should at least have some very small sway, at least some kind of impact to help you out a little bit more. But other than that, it's just a very good anti-air unit. So yeah, once you manage to get this, you won't have any trouble against any air units ever. Except maybe like some stray butterfly swoops in and, with its bajillion DPS kills, half a mineral line before your Valkyries can get there. Okay, now Wasp. There are a lot of complaints about Wasp, and Wasp all-ins, it's a bit cheesy. But at the same time, like, it also scales so badly. It can pair alright with a Blink. Put it low A tier. It's very fast. It scales so badly though. Overmaking Wasps can be good though. It can work out. I've seen it work with some of the like Blinks, Gunbots, and Recalls. So yeah, it's strong, but it's hard to say. Yeah, it's quite strong in the early game. But again, it's kind of hard to say. Because I feel like for them to do anything, you need to overmake them. If you don't overmake them, then I feel like they just die. Because they don't have enough damage. Like when you use them, you either win the fight and still have half your army. You kill their army and you still have half your army left. Or when you lose the fight, you lose all the Wasps and you don't kill a single unit. Like, it's a bit... Yeah, if you're gonna win the fight, you really need to make sure you win the fight. But yeah. This is my tier list for these units. Hope you guys liked it. Battle Aces devs, I hope you managed to find this video and take my advice about perhaps changing some of the costs to be somewhat unique in that to be a feature of some of these units, especially the Bulwark. I think this needs it more than anything. Changes costs to be a unique cost. Because right now its roll and stuff is just so bad. It does need to be good. I think just because it's a unit that you start with doesn't mean it needs to be bad. Like I don't think that's a very good philosophy. Yes, you want people to try out these other units, and these other decks and stuff, but making your original units just weak isn't really going to incentivize people to do that. it's just gonna make people mad at the fact that their first units are so bad, and that these units that they might want to try out later in combination with other units, they just can't do because they're just so bad. Like for me, I start with these units and I see all these other units and I go, oh, let me use these other units. I don't care if my units are good or bad. But then once I get these other units and I want to try to mix in some of these original ones, I can't, and that just sucks. And you can't really use the original units either. This is so bad. Like only the so it's getting a little bit late, but yeah, only the crabs. Like the crabs are somewhat useful. The king crabs are quite strong. They do need a bit of a nerf, I think, or change. Yeah. The rest are all bad. Oh no, heavy ballista. Heavy ballista is very strong. That's right. That was the other one. But yeah. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.